What happens when a racist officer meets a woman he underestimates? Can one encounter challenge deeply rooted prejudices? What if the person you dismiss turns out to be someone with immense power and authority? How would you react if the tables turned in the most unexpected way? In today's video, we delve into a shocking story that uncovers the complexities of race, power, and identity in a world where assumptions can lead to dire consequences. Today, we're exploring the true story of a pregnant black woman who faced aggression from a racist officer. At first glance, she seemed like just another victim, but she was anything but ordinary. As we unfold this gripping tale, you'll learn about her incredible journey as a police captain, the unexpected twist that changed everything, and the lessons that challenge our understanding of justice and equality. Stay with us as we reveal lesser-known facts about this incident, including the officer's background and the systemic issues that allowed such an event to occur. We will explore not only the details of the confrontation, but also the broader implications of racial bias in law enforcement. By the end of this video, you'll gain insights into how power dynamics play out in real life and the importance of standing against discrimination in all its forms. In a world where many people are quick to judge based on appearance or stereotypes, this story serves as a reminder that strength can come from the most unexpected places. It shows us that those who face adversity can rise above and confront their aggressors in ways that challenge societal norms. You won't want to miss how this pregnant woman turned a moment of fear into a powerful statement against prejudice. So, why should you watch till the end? Not only will you be drawn into an inspiring tale of resilience, but you'll also uncover crucial conversations about race and authority that are more relevant now than ever. This story sheds light on the importance of understanding the people behind the badges and the struggles they face, particularly in a system that often overlooks the voices of the marginalized. As we dig deeper, we'll look at the aftermath of this encounter and what it means for the future of policing and community relations. How do we hold those in power accountable? What steps can be taken to ensure that this type of injustice doesn't happen again? Join us on this journey as we challenge assumptions, explore the depths of human experience, and highlight the resilience of those who fight back against oppression. Your perspective on justice, equity, and the fight against racism may just be transformed by the end of this video. So, grab a seat and prepare to engage with a story that's more than just a headline. It's a wake-up call to all of us. Together, let's explore the truth behind the headlines and learn from a tale that proves that the fight against racism is far from over. In a bustling city, where the noise of traffic blended with the chatter of people, there lived a woman named Detective Angela Parker. She was not just any detective. She was a dedicated police captain with a passion for justice and a deep commitment to her community. Standing tall and confident, Angela was known for her unwavering resolve and sharp instincts. She had climbed the ranks in a male-dominated field, often facing challenges that could break the spirit of any lesser individual. But Angela was strong. She was a warrior. However, there was something even more remarkable about her at that moment. Angela was pregnant. As she navigated her day-to-day life, she felt the weight of her responsibilities as both a law enforcement officer and an expectant mother. Each time she placed a hand on her belly, she thought about the future, a future that now felt uncertain and precarious. Would she be able to protect her child in a world that often viewed people through a lens of bias? Would she be able to continue her fight for justice while balancing motherhood? Angela's story wasn't just about her career. It was about her journey, her dreams, and the legacy she hoped to build. She often shared her vision with friends and family, imagining a world where her child could grow up free from the shadows of racism and discrimination. As she prepared for her baby's arrival, she felt a blend of excitement and fear. The world outside was unpredictable, and she often pondered how to instill strength and resilience in her child. The day began like any other. Angela was driving home from a late shift, tired yet fulfilled after helping to solve a complicated case. Her mind was racing with thoughts of her upcoming maternity leave and the preparations she needed to make. Suddenly, A police cruiser pulled up beside her, and Angela noticed the officer inside. He wore a stern expression, a look that many would interpret as a desire to assert authority. The officer was Officer Mark Thompson, known in the precinct for his aggressive demeanor and troubling record. Rumors swirled around him. He had been involved in several controversial incidents that highlighted a pattern of racism. Yet he still held a badge, a symbol of power that often went unchecked. His reputation preceded him, and it was one that made Angela feel uneasy as their eyes met through the glass. "Roll down your window," he barked, his tone harsh and demanding. Angela's heart raced, not because she was afraid, but because she felt the familiar chill of injustice creeping in. She knew she was well within her rights, yet she sensed the tension that came with being a black woman in a society that often judged her by her skin color rather than her character. "Is there a problem, officer?" she replied, her voice steady but firm. He leaned closer, an arrogant smirk creeping across his face. "Just checking on you. You look a little lost, pregnant lady. Maybe you shouldn't be driving." The words hung in the air, laced with condescension. Angela clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to let anger cloud her judgment. She was not just any pregnant woman. She was a police captain with years of experience. She had earned her place in the department and would not allow his assumptions to dictate her actions. As she took a deep breath, she felt the flutter of her baby kicking inside her. It was a reminder of her strength, a spark of resilience that coursed through her. She leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Officer Thompson. "I'm not lost. I'm heading home from work, and I suggest you check your tone." The officer's demeanor shifted, and for a moment, surprise flickered across his face. It was a fleeting recognition that he was dealing with someone who wasn't afraid to stand up to him. But the surprise quickly morphed into anger. He leaned back in his seat, clearly not used to being challenged, especially by a black woman. "Let me see your license and registration," he demanded, trying to reassert control over the situation. Angela felt the tension in her chest rise. She knew she had to tread carefully. "Of course, but I'd appreciate a little respect while you do your job." As she handed him the documents, she couldn't shake the feeling that this interaction was about more than just a traffic stop. It was about the intersection of race, authority, and identity. She was aware that for many, her title as a police captain might not mean much. To Officer Thompson, she was just a pregnant black woman who was somehow beneath him. In that moment, a strange dynamic unfolded. Angela felt the weight of her role, both as a captain and as a mother, pressing down on her. The officer was projecting his insecurities onto her, as if her very presence challenged his worldview. She could see it in the way his fingers trembled slightly as he took her documents, the way his eyes narrowed as he scrutinized her every move. But she would not back down. "I hope you understand that actions have consequences," she said, her voice steady but filled with an underlying fire. "This isn't just a traffic stop for me. It's a moment that defines how we view each other as human beings." The officer seemed taken aback by her words, but he quickly masked his surprise with a scowl. "You think you're above the law just because you have a badge," he sneered, stepping closer, invading her space. Angela's heart raced, not just from fear, but from the realization that she was standing on the edge of something significant. She felt adrenaline coursing through her veins, fueled by the need to protect herself and her unborn child. This moment was about to turn into a confrontation that neither of them anticipated. As Officer Thompson leaned in closer, Angela could see the arrogance in his posture. It was as if he believed that his badge granted him the right to belittle her, to exert power over someone he perceived as weak. But she wasn't weak. She was strong, capable, and determined. "Don't make this worse than it needs to be," he said, trying to intimidate her. But Angela stood her ground, her resolve unwavering. "You need to understand that I won't be treated like a criminal just because of my skin color or my condition. I am a police captain, and I demand to be treated with respect." The tension in the air was thick, crackling with energy. Angela could feel the weight of the moment. The world around them, faded as they stood locked in this standoff, two individuals representing vastly different perspectives. What neither of them knew was that this encounter would become a pivotal moment, not just in their lives, but in the conversations surrounding race, authority, and the fight for justice. As Angela stared into the officer's eyes, she felt a surge of determination. She would not allow this moment to define her. Instead, she would redefine it for herself and for others like her. And then, just as the confrontation reached its peak, something unexpected happened. Officer Thompson's phone buzzed, pulling him momentarily out of the confrontation. He glanced down, and in that split second, Angela seized the opportunity to remind him of the gravity of his actions. "Remember, the world is watching," she said, her voice calm yet powerful. "You may think you have control now, but accountability is always just a step away." With that, the officer stepped back, caught off guard by her confidence and the sudden shift in the atmosphere. It was a moment that would echo in both their lives, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that underestimating someone could lead to unexpected consequences. As the standoff continued, both Angela and Officer Thompson were left to confront their own beliefs. Angela was determined to stand tall, not just for herself, but for her child, and for all those who faced discrimination. This was her moment, a moment of defiance and strength that would resonate far beyond this single encounter. As the seconds ticked by, the tension between Angela and Officer Thompson hung in the air like a thick fog. Their eyes locked in a silent battle, each waiting for the other to make a move. Angela could feel her heart racing, the adrenaline surging through her veins. She knew that the stakes were high. This was not just a simple traffic stop. It was a confrontation that held the potential for far-reaching consequences. "Step out of the vehicle," Officer Thompson barked, his voice booming and authoritative. His eyes narrowed, clearly expecting compliance, but Angela's instincts kicked in. She had faced difficult situations before, but this felt different. This was personal, charged with the weight of prejudice and power. "Why? I haven't done anything wrong," she replied, her voice steady but filled with determination. She felt the familiar flutter of her baby inside her, a reminder that she was fighting for more than just herself. She was fighting for a future, for her child, and for justice. "You think just because you're a captain you can ignore the law." He shot back, anger boiling just beneath the surface. It was evident that his frustration stemmed from a combination of his own insecurities and a refusal to accept that Angela, a black woman, could hold authority over him. Angela's mind raced as she considered her options. She was aware that stepping out of the car could escalate the situation further. With a deep breath, she decided to take a stand, knowing that the consequences of her actions could ripple beyond this moment. "You're about to make a big mistake. I'm a police captain, and I'm not afraid of you." His jaw clenched at her words, and for a moment there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. It was as if he was momentarily caught off guard by her defiance. But that brief pause was quickly overshadowed by his need to assert dominance. "Get out of the car now," he commanded again, this time with a hint of desperation in his tone. With every passing moment, Angela felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The world outside was a blur, but within that car, time seemed to stand still. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears, and she felt a surge of strength rising within her. This was her moment to confront the biases that had plagued her throughout her career. "Do you really think this is how you maintain order? By threatening a pregnant woman?" she countered, her voice calm but firm. She needed to challenge him, to make him realize the absurdity of his actions. "You should know better, officer. This isn't just about you and me. It's about how we treat each other as human beings." The officer's face flushed with anger, but there was also a flicker of confusion. His authority was being questioned, and he was not accustomed to being challenged, especially not by a woman, and certainly not by a black woman who dared to stand her ground. "I don't need a lecture from you, lady," he spat, his voice laced with contempt. Angela could feel the tension escalating, the air thick with hostility. She glanced around, noticing a few passers-by beginning to take notice of the situation. People were stopping, pulling out their phones, their curiosity piqued. The officer's power play was being witnessed, and suddenly, Angela felt a rush of resolve. This wasn't just about her. It was about accountability and standing up against racism. "Maybe you need to understand who you're dealing with," she said, her voice rising slightly, drawing the attention of those nearby. "I've dedicated my life to protecting my community. And right now, I'm here to protect myself and my child from your aggression." The officer's face darkened, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief. He hadn't expected this kind of pushback. "You think you can just defy me because you wear a badge?" he snarled, stepping closer, trying to intimidate her. Angela felt a surge of fear, but quickly transformed it into strength. She leaned forward, meeting his gaze head-on. "It's not just about the badge, Thompson. It's about integrity, respect, and the responsibility we hold as officers. You may wear that uniform, but it doesn't make you above the law." The crowd had grown, and Angela could feel their eyes on her, their breaths held in anticipation. What would happen next? Would the officer back down, or would he push harder, unable to accept that she wouldn't be intimidated? The moment felt like a powder keg, ready to explode at any second. "Do you think I care about your little speeches?" he retorted, his voice low and menacing. "You think I'm afraid of you because you have a badge? I'll show you who's in charge here." With that, he reached for his radio, his fingers trembling slightly. The move was deliberate, a show of force meant to intimidate her further. "I'm calling for backup," he said, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Let's see how tough you are when the real officers get here." Panic surged within Angela, but she quickly pushed it aside. She needed to remain calm, to keep her wits about her. If he called for backup, it could turn this situation into something dangerous, something that could end poorly for her and her child. "Is that really necessary?" she asked, her voice even, though she could feel the tension crackling in the air. "You're the one who's escalating this situation. All I want is to go home safely." But the officer's resolve only seemed to strengthen. He turned away for a moment, speaking into his radio, and Angela seized the opportunity to speak to the growing crowd. "Listen, everyone. This officer is trying to intimidate me because I'm pregnant and a black woman. This is not right. This is the very racism we're fighting against." Her words cut through the tension, and several people in the crowd nodded, some even murmuring in agreement. The officer's gaze darted to the onlookers, realizing that he was losing control of the narrative. Angela could see the gears turning in his mind, and for a moment, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would reconsider his actions. But Thompson, desperate to reassert his dominance, turned back to her with fury blazing in his eyes. "You think you're some kind of hero. You're nothing but a troublemaker. You're going to regret this," he threatened, taking a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. Angela stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt the warmth of her baby against her skin, a reminder of everything she was fighting for. "If you think this is about being a hero, you're mistaken. This is about doing what's right. This is about justice." As the crowd grew restless, a murmur of discontent rippled through them. People began to pull out their phones, recording the encounter, documenting the moment that had spiraled from a routine stop into a clash of wills. Just then, a woman stepped forward from the crowd, her own phone raised. "You can't treat her like this. She's a police captain. You're supposed to protect and serve, not intimidate." Her voice rang out, cutting through the hostility. Officer Thompson's face flushed with rage, but he seemed momentarily stunned by the show of support for Angela. The realization that the crowd was on her side began to sink in, and he quickly shifted tactics, trying to regain control. "I don't need you to lecture me. I'm doing my job," he shouted, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "Your job should be to uphold the law, not abuse your power." Angela shot back, her voice stronger than before. She could feel the collective energy of the crowd behind her, bolstering her courage. The officer's fingers tightened around his radio, and Angela could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. He had the authority to call for backup, but at what cost? The crowd was becoming increasingly agitated, and if he escalated this further, he risked losing everything: his reputation, his job, and perhaps even his freedom. Suddenly, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere, he took a step back, eyes darting around at the witnesses. "You all don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, desperately trying to regain control over the situation. Angela seized the moment. "This isn't just about me, Officer Thompson. It's about everyone who's been mistreated because of the color of their skin. You have a chance right now to change the narrative. Will you continue to let your biases dictate your actions, or will you take a step back and do what's right?" For a heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze. The tension was palpable, the crowd holding its breath, waiting for the officer to respond. Angela could see the gears turning in his mind, a mixture of confusion and realization washing over his features. This was a moment of reckoning, not just for her but for him. Would he choose to dig his heels in, or would he recognize the moment for what it was? The officer hesitated, caught between pride and the undeniable truth that was unfolding before him. And then, in that pivotal moment, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, breaking the charged silence. "Angela." As the sirens wailed in the distance, a sense of impending dread washed over Angela. She could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her shoulders, her heart pounding in rhythm with the approaching sound. The moment had escalated beyond her expectations, and now she was on the brink of something that could change everything. Officer Thompson, his face flushed with frustration and anger, glanced back at the approaching police cars. The sirens were a harbinger of both help and trouble. He had initiated this confrontation, but the growing crowd was witnessing the fallout. For him, the stakes had never been higher. He was aware that his actions could not only be scrutinized by the people around him, but also by his fellow officers who would soon arrive. Angela's mind raced as she processed what was happening. She stood tall, though her body was tense with anxiety. The presence of the other officers could either validate her truth or amplify Thompson's narrative. Would they support him, or would they see the situation as it truly was? The uncertainty gripped her like a vice. The crowd was buzzing with energy, a mix of concern and outrage. Some individuals were recording the encounter on their phones, while others were murmuring among themselves, their voices a symphony of disbelief and support for Angela. She could feel their energy coursing through her, empowering her in this tense moment. As the first police car pulled up, the officer in the passenger seat immediately took in the scene. He stepped out, his eyes darting between Angela and Thompson. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone professional yet cautious. Thompson, still brimming with indignation, quickly interjected. "I was just performing my duty. This woman refused to comply with my orders. She's creating a scene." Angela, unyielding and fueled by the moment, responded, "I was trying to explain my situation. I'm a police captain, and I was being threatened for no reason other than the color of my skin." Her voice carried through the crowd, a stark contrast to Thompson's bluster. The new officer raised an eyebrow, his gaze shifting from Thompson to Angela. He seemed to sense the tension in the air, the palpable divide between the two. "Is this true?" he asked Thompson, who was still struggling to regain his footing. "Yes," Thompson shot back, desperation creeping into his voice. "She's being uncooperative. She thinks she can talk to me like that just because she wears a badge." The tone of his voice was defensive, as if he were trying to justify his actions rather than owning up to them. Angela took a deep breath, knowing this was her chance to shift the narrative. "I was not uncooperative. I was standing up for myself, for my child, and for every person who has faced discrimination. I thought officers were supposed to protect and serve, not intimidate and threaten." The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement, and a few people even clapped softly, their support for Angela shining through the tension. It was a small but powerful gesture, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this battle. Just then, another police car arrived, and this time, a sergeant stepped out, his demeanor authoritative. He assessed the situation, his eyes narrowing as he took in the details. "What's going on here?" he repeated, now directing his question at Angela, sensing the friction in the air. "I was just trying to drive home when Officer Thompson decided to pull me over," she explained, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. Instead of handling the situation with professionalism, he chose to escalate it. "I have a right to feel safe and protected, especially during a traffic stop." The sergeant nodded, his gaze shifting to Thompson. "Is this true, officer?" There was a weight in his words, a clear expectation that Thompson would need to defend himself against the accusations. "Of course not," Thompson snapped, his voice rising in pitch. "She's lying. She was aggressive, and I was just trying to do my job." The defensive posture was clear, but it was also evident that the more he protested, the more uncertain he seemed. As the tension in the air thickened, Angela noticed that the first officer who arrived was observing closely. He seemed torn, unsure of whom to side with. The crowd continued to murmur, their collective energy fueling Angela's resolve. "Look, I'm not here to create a scene," Angela stated, her voice firm. "I'm here to ensure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. We all know there are systemic issues within our law enforcement. This is a clear example of how those biases manifest. We need to address this, not ignore it." The sergeant regarded her carefully, weighing her words against Thompson's frantic claims. He could see the crowd, the undeniable support for Angela, and he recognized the broader implications of this encounter. "All right, let's take a step back," the sergeant said, his tone shifting to one of calm authority. "Angela, can you step over here with me?" He gestured for her to move away from the immediate scene. As she walked with the sergeant, she could feel the eyes of the crowd on her. They were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. It was a heavy responsibility, and she knew that every word she said could carry significant weight. "Listen," the sergeant began, his voice low and serious. "I understand that this situation is deeply frustrating, but I need you to be patient. We'll get to the bottom of this. But I need you to understand that this is going to take time." Angela nodded, feeling the tension ease slightly as she focused on the sergeant's words. "I appreciate that. I just want to ensure that no one else has to endure what I just went through. This is a serious issue that affects so many people." Back at the original scene, Thompson was growing increasingly agitated. The initial authority he felt was slipping away, replaced by a sense of dread. He could hear the whispers of the crowd, their voices tinged with disbelief and anger at his behavior. "Listen," he began, attempting to regain control. "You all don't know the full story. You weren't there. You don't understand." But his words fell flat, met with skepticism and disdain. People began to shake their heads, voices rising in protest. "You're the one who doesn't understand. You're the one abusing your power." A man stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is exactly why we need to stand up against racism in law enforcement." Thompson's fists clenched at his sides, and he could feel the heat rising in his cheeks. This was not how he envisioned his day going. He was supposed to be in control, enforcing the law, not facing a crowd of angry citizens questioning his actions. As the sergeant spoke with Angela, he also kept an eye on Thompson, who was becoming increasingly defensive. The pressure was mounting, and it was clear that this confrontation was going to leave a lasting impact on both officers and the community. "You're not above the law, Officer Thompson," the sergeant called out, his voice authoritative. "We are here to protect and serve, not to intimidate. Your actions have consequences." Angela watched as the sergeant's words resonated with the crowd, the collective agreement palpable. She felt a rush of hope. Perhaps this was the moment that would spark change. But just as it seemed that the situation might resolve, Thompson's frustration boiled over. "You all think you're better than me. Just because you have a badge doesn't make you a hero, he shouted, his voice echoing in the tense air. Angela turned back to him, her heart pounding. This isn't about being a hero. It's about accountability. We need to be better, and we need to demand that from each other. The sergeant stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. That's enough, Thompson. You need to understand the gravity of your actions. We will investigate this matter thoroughly. Angela felt a surge of relief, knowing that the sergeant was taking her concerns seriously. The atmosphere in the crowd shifted slightly, the tension still thick, but now tinged with a sense of possibility. As the officers began to regroup, Angela sensed that this moment was just the beginning. The crowd, once just passive observers, had transformed into an active part of this narrative. They were standing up, demanding change, and holding officers accountable for their actions. Just then, an older woman from the crowd stepped forward, her voice steady. We need to support one another. This isn't just about this incident. It's about creating a safer community for everyone. We need to ensure that our officers are held to the highest standards. Angela nodded, encouraged by the woman's words. Exactly. We need to be allies in this fight against racism and discrimination within law enforcement. This is a systemic issue that requires our collective effort. As the sergeant turned to address the crowd, Angela felt a sense of unity in the air. We're listening, he said, his voice carrying authority and empathy. We want to ensure that everyone in this community feels safe and respected. Your voices matter, and we will work together to address these issues. The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, and Angela could see the shift in energy. They were not just witnesses. They were a part of a movement, a collective. As the confrontation continued, the atmosphere around Angela and Officer Thompson crackled with tension. The crowd had transformed into a living entity, a collective force filled with emotion and determination. Whispers of solidarity and anger wove through the air like an electric current. Angela stood at the center of it all, her heart racing, aware that the stakes were higher than ever. Angela had always believed in the goodness of people, in the idea that everyone had a role to play in making the world a better place. But at this moment, her faith was being tested. The fear of what could happen next wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Would this be the day she became a symbol of change, or the day her life spiraled into chaos? Officer Thompson was visibly shaken, his bravado crumbling as the crowd pressed closer, their eyes fixed on him like a spotlight. He could feel their judgment, the weight of their collective gaze pressing down on him. This was not just a routine traffic stop anymore. It was a defining moment, a pivotal crossroads where everything could go wrong. Look, you don't know what it's like to be in my shoes, Thompson shouted, his voice quaking with a mix of anger and desperation. He felt cornered, like a wild animal trapped with no way out. I'm just doing my job. I have to keep the streets safe. The crowd's response was immediate. A chorus of voices rose in protest. You're not keeping us safe. You're making us afraid. A young man stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. You need to listen to her. This isn't about you. Angela could see the shift in the crowd's mood. They were rallying around her, feeding off her determination. This was not just her fight. It was theirs too. People were starting to share their own stories of encounters with police, moments where they felt vulnerable or unjustly treated. Each story added to the weight of the moment, creating a tapestry of shared experiences woven together by threads of pain, anger, and hope. The young man's voice carried through the throng. You think you're above the law, Thompson. You're not. You need to understand that your actions have consequences. His words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the urgency of the situation. Angela felt a surge of strength. She had spent years in the police force, fighting for justice, advocating for change, but here she was, feeling the raw power of the people behind her. This was what she had always dreamed of, a community coming together, united against injustice. But the fear of what could happen next lingered, a shadow threatening to engulf her newfound courage. As the crowd grew more animated, Thompson felt the walls closing in. He glanced over at his fellow officers, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and concern. They were trained to handle conflict, to diffuse situations, but this was different. This was not just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. The sergeant, still trying to maintain control of the scene, stepped in. "Everyone, please, we need to calm down." His voice, while authoritative, was laced with a hint of panic. The crowd wasn't just resisting. They were demanding change, and the officer could sense that this wasn't something he could easily manage. "Angela, let's step aside," he urged, motioning for her to move away from the growing crowd. But Angela stood her ground, her eyes locked on Thompson. "No, I want to confront this head-on. We can't shy away from what's happening here." The sergeant looked torn, caught between wanting to protect Angela and understanding her need to confront Thompson. "You have every right to express yourself, but we need to ensure everyone's safety." His voice was calm, but Angela could hear the tremor in his tone, the urgency of the moment pressing on him. In the crowd, people began to chant, their voices rising in a powerful rhythm. "No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace." The words echoed off the buildings surrounding them, a mantra that reverberated deep in Angela's chest. The energy surged, a wave of unity crashing against the tension between the two officers. Thompson felt cornered, like a deer caught in headlights. He had never expected this. In his mind, he had envisioned the day going smoothly, enforcing the law without any issues. Now he was facing a crowd that was not only questioning his authority, but also demanding accountability for the very system he represented. "Enough," Thompson shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. "You all don't know what it's like out here. Every day we face threats, and I'm just trying to do my job." His eyes darted around, searching for a way to regain control of the narrative, but the words fell flat against the tide of outrage. Angela, her heart pounding, felt the shift in the crowd's energy. She stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "You want to talk about threats. The real threat is fear. Fear that comes from people like you, who misuse their power and protect their own rather than serve the community." The crowd erupted into cheers, the support for Angela growing louder. She felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was her moment. She was no longer just a police captain. She was a voice for change, a beacon of hope for those who felt voiceless. Thompson clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. The crowd's energy was overwhelming, and he felt isolated, as if he were on an island while the tide rose around him. He was losing control of the narrative, and deep down, he knew it. "Just listen to me," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'm here to keep you safe. I'm not the enemy." But the crowd was relentless, voices rising in unison. "You are the enemy. You are the problem." Each chant echoed with the weight of shared experiences, a reminder of the injustices faced by many. Angela could see the anger and pain in their faces, and she knew she had to harness that energy for something greater. The sergeant, realizing the situation was escalating, took a step forward. "Everyone, we need to take a breath. This isn't the way to address this. We can have a conversation without escalating the situation." His voice held a commanding tone, but even he could see that the crowd was not in a mood to listen. "Why should we listen to you?" shouted a woman from the back, her voice fierce. "You're all part of the same system that oppresses us. You don't get to decide how we voice our anger." Angela felt the intensity of the moment. The crowd was a living organism, pulsating with emotions, driven by a shared purpose. She knew they were at a crossroads, where they could either continue to challenge the status quo or succumb to fear and silence. "I'm here for you," Angela declared, raising her voice above the din. "This isn't just about me or Officer Thompson. This is about all of us. We deserve to live without fear, to be treated with respect. It's time we start a real conversation about what it means to serve and protect." The crowd erupted again, the chant shifting slightly to Angela. Angela. As they rallied around her. In that moment, she felt invincible, as if the weight of the world was being lifted off her shoulders. But just as quickly, she felt a flicker of fear. What if this escalated? What if the situation turned violent? Thompson, seeing the tide turning against him, felt a chill run down his spine. The chants were drowning him out, and the crowd was no longer just an audience. They were a force to be reckoned with. "You're all making a mistake," he shouted, desperation tinging his voice. "You don't understand the consequences of your actions." Angela turned to him, her gaze fierce and unwavering. "We understand the consequences all too well, officer. The consequences of silence, of allowing fear to dictate our lives. This is our moment to stand up and demand accountability." As she spoke, the crowd surged forward, a wave of determination and unity crashing against the police line. The atmosphere was electric, filled with anticipation. Would this lead to a breakthrough, or was it a powder keg waiting to explode? In that charged moment, Angela felt an urge to push forward, to lead the charge for justice. But she also understood the delicate balance of power at play. The line between progress and chaos was razor thin, and one wrong move could send everything spiraling out of control. As Thompson looked out at the crowd, he realized he was losing ground, not just in authority but in his own beliefs. For years, he had stood firmly in his role as a police officer, convinced he was on the right side of justice. But now, faced with the raw truth of people's pain and anger, he felt his resolve wavering. What if he had been wrong? What if his actions had contributed to the very fear and mistrust he was supposed to combat? Angela could see the internal struggle reflected in his eyes, and she seized the moment. "We're not here to fight you, Thompson. We're here to fight for a better world, a world where everyone feels safe, regardless of the color of their skin or their background." The crowd quieted for a moment, hanging onto her words, sensing the shift in the air.